Okay. So we said Herfindahl-Hirschman index is a way of measuring industry concentration equal to sum of the squares of market shares for the firm in industry. And the way to calculate, so HHI index is a way to measure industry concentration. It is equal to the sums of the squares of market shares for all firms in an industry. It is equal to sum of the squares of market shares for all firms in an industry. So HHI is equal to share of the first firm plus share of the second firm square plus share of the third firm to the nth firm. So basically it's judging market power or level of competition in an industry. One firm, if there's one firm in a market, that's pure monopoly. That means it has 100% of market share. So they own all the shares of the market. Was that a question?
Yeah, well, S1, 2, S2, 2, S3, 3, S4.
And that's
SN4.
SN.
SN4, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, no?
Yeah, so this is SN to the nth power. So, like, it can continue however many markets there are, right? So the maximum the Herfindahl-Hirschman index could be is 100 square, which is 10,000, which is maximum, meaning pure monopoly, right? So 50 firms, each has 2% of market share. What's the HHI for them? Well, each firm has 2% market share, so 2 to the square, times, there are 50 of them. So that is 4 times 50, that is 200. The lower the number, the lower the HHI number, the greater the competition. The greater the competition. The lowest it can be is close to 0. The lowest HHI can be is close to 0. The closer it gets to 0, the more competition there is in the industry.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the formula there, you have S1 squared, S2 squared, and then S3 cubed. But when I wrote it in the last note.
I'm sorry, it's not S3. It's all squared.
Okay.
All squared.
Even in the last one, that's square. It's
That's
N.
N. Oh yeah, that should also be squared.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a sum of squares of market share. So they're all in squares, and N is like however number of market it is at. But they're all gonna be squares. Sums of squares of market. Sorry. Good eye. So HHI sums of squares of market share in an industry. Okay? It's all squares. Market share is percent of all sales in a market compared to other firms in the industry. So market share is percent of all sales in a market compared to other firms in the industry. Market share is percent of sales in a market compared to other industries, compared to other firms in the industry. So whenever there is big companies want to merge, let's say airlines merge sometimes. We know AT&T loves to merge with other cellular companies. So before we had cellular, I think, and then AT&T and cellular merged, became AT&T. So whenever these big companies want to merge, there's actually a board that they have to get approval from, and the way they approve it is based on HHI. So they actually use HHI to see what's the concentration level of the industry. If it's too towards monopoly, like if the market share, so if AT&T has a really big market share, let's say, and it's like almost they're going towards this monopoly power, the board will reject their request of merging. Because what will happen is that once it will merge with Singular, or it will get even bigger, right? It will acquire more power, more sales, more profits, so it will get closer to even more monopoly. So it might get rejected. So anytime big firms request for mergers, they have to get an approval from the board, and they use this HHI to either approve or reject the request. So what are the Department of Justice guidelines for mergers? So Department of Justice merger guidelines are, so if HHI is less than 1,500, industry is not concentrated. if HHI is between 1,500 and 2,500, industry is moderately concentrated. If the HHI is greater than 2,500, industry is highly concentrated. So highly concentrated would be towards meaning more monopoly power. Highly concentrated, more monopoly in the industry. Right? So if a firm, a 5-firm industry, so there's an industry that has only 5 firms in it, with market share equal to 65, $15, $10, $5, and $5 would have HHI equal to so sum of squares of each market, right? So 65 squared plus 15 squared plus 10 squared plus 5 squared plus 5 squared. So this is 4225. So the HHI is equal to 4,600. So according to the HHI guideline, should is this concentrated or not concentrated? Highly concentrated. So our next topic is, unless someone has a question. Does anyone have a question? Okay. So next we'll be talking about Nash equilibrium. I said this is my favorite topic. It's kind of like a game. That's why I like it. So if you have seen that movie Beautiful Mind, it's played by Russell Crowe. He's actually a schizophrenic. They find out later, but in his earlier age, when he was in his 90s and 20s, he went to I don't know which school was it, but some big school, and he came up with this Nash equilibrium theory, in which basically they're when firms are trying to make a decision, you have to keep in mind what other people are going to do as well, right? So the theory is based on that when you're trying to make a decision whether to decrease price or, I don't know, increase output or something, or advertise or not to advertise, big firms have to keep in mind is what their competitor is going to do as a reaction, or what they could be doing right now with this strategy. So Nash equilibrium basically tells you how to come up with the best strategy, keeping your competitors in mind. So keeping what the other person is gonna do in mind. So it can be a little bit tricky at first. Just stay focused, and but once you get it, it's fun and you like it. And the concept is really cool because you're constantly, because when you're deciding, you're thinking what your opponent is doing too. You know, that's the fun part. That what could they do, and how would that affect me if they choose to do this? So Nash equilibrium is players' best payoff, taking into account the self-interested actions of all other players affecting the outcome. And the way he came up with this theory, it's funny, they show it in the movie, and this is a true story. He was sitting in the bar with his friends, and a blonde girl comes in, and she's really pretty and everything.